Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight, it's just kind of a fun night for me. Gretchen's gone, so I don't have anything particular planned except working on some uses for webby soft tackle and maybe a little bit of dry fly application. And then at the end, the weekly tip, we're going to talk about UV glue, and I'll actually be coming to you for help rather than me bringing you ideas. Though I'll have a couple ideas too, but I'll be looking to you for some help. Anyway, welcome. I'm Al Beatty from Boise, and as I said, my lovely bride is in Arkansas, continuing to teach a class there. I probably ought to start by turning everything on instead of too busy chatting when I was getting started here. Let's make sure my camera's working. Yeah, it's fine. Materials. As you can see, I've got some materials, and don't even ask me to try to figure out what the heck all that stuff is. I got it all out because it sounded like a good idea, but the truth of the matter is I have zero plan except the first fly tonight, and the last fly will be a dry fly using traditional soft tackle stuff. That said, I've just got a whole bunch of notes here, and I just jotted them down as they came to mind. Everything you see tonight except for the first two, or the first one, the last one I've never done. So we're going to be wading in the deep water together, and we'll just have to go from there. But we're going to start tonight with a dry fly that I used in the 90s, back in the day before I went to work for Whiting Farm. And I was a working guide in Montana, and not that Hackle wasn't readily available, but it wasn't as readily available, especially in the early 90s, as it became later. And so I found that the Whiting hen was such good Hackle if you used it for what it was, that I tied all my elk hair caddis with that, my personal ones. The ones that went to the store, of course, you use the Hackle that you needed to. Well, that's the first thing I'm going to do tonight is an elk hair caddis, but we're going to take a look at it from a different direction. And I'm going to start tonight with a size 12. Now, that's much smaller than I normally do, but one of the things about tying dry flies with hen Hackle, after being spoiled by those 14-inch long saddle hackles from Whiting Saddles, well, the hen hackles just aren't that long. They've got some pretty good stuff in them, but they're not that long. I'm going to start tonight. I think what I'll do is I'll move my focus point just a little bit and see if I can zoom into the vise just a little bit more. There we go. Looks like that might work. And I'm going to start just like you traditionally would with an elk hair caddis by putting down a thread base. And I have to admit that many of the elk hair caddis that I tied back in the day, especially the ones that I was using myself on the river, they were tied with thread. We didn't mess around. We had lots of thread, and you were in a hurry to get back on the water, not to worry about what the dubbing was. And now I want to point out something here on this hen Hackle. I want you to notice that, okay, so right back here, it's pretty webby, but even this webby stuff, if you look out on the very end, it's a little bit spiky. Well, let's move closer to the tip. And that's a lot more spiky. And as you get out towards the tip, it's even spikier still. Well, one of the things that I find interesting is today, there's a lot of people who are using CDC as you name it. I'll just leave it at that point, but they're using CDC for stuff, and it's far from dry fly quality feathers, but it does have a tendency to float. Well, so does this. And it's got a little bit of dry fly quality as well. So I'm just going to tie that on the hook right here at the front and just start wrapping towards the back. And after I get back close to the end, I'll just finish wrapping to the end of the shank. All right, we'll try this again. And we just won't have the rotating feature, but we can just do it on our finger, and that works too. Now I'll just work my way forward with the thread, working my way through the Hackle. Makes a really tough application, and it stiffens up the Hackle a bit as you work the thread through those stems. Okay, I'll just kind of fuzz all that up. Good, that's looking great. Now I've already sprayed down my elk hair with Static Guard. In fact, it's been so bad this spring, I had to go to the store and get 2 more cans of this stuff. It's been crazy. Anyway, so I'll get some elk out here. And on my way back to the vise, I'll stop at the waste bin, just like I always do. Get rid of all the short fibers and underfur. What's interesting is I completely forgot about using hen hackle on elk hair caddis. And there's a couple, I did it on some humpies too, because they're a fly that the nature of the material in the finished fly tends to float pretty good. You just want the hackle there more for legs, I guess, than it is for flotation. And this works real well. And it's like that CDC that everybody is finding a great thing to put on their flies now. It just kind of wiggles around in the water really good. And so if you've got some whiting hen, it's great. I can't tell you the quality of hen from some of the other manufacturers, or not manufacturers, but producers, because all I've used for, God, 20 years or more is whiting. So, okay, we'll just finish that off.
Don't forget to switch back to your fly.
Oh, God, thank you. I didn't do that, and I already got the fly done. There it is. And I apologize, folks, but I think everybody knows how an elk hair caddis goes together. And whoever chimed in and helped me with that, keep me on point now. You can't tell that I'm a duck out of water when Gretchen's not here. Okay, I'll just trim that. But I want you to notice that there's good flotation in the wing material. You don't really need the hackle on the elk hair caddis, at least not for the flotation, but that's just stout enough dry fly wise to support it somewhat, and it also wiggles around in the water pretty good. Well, anyway, now we're going to go to a totally different concept. I touched on this a little bit last week, and I'm going to tie everything that from now on a size 8 long shank hook. And please, this is not because you would tie a pattern on this. When I bought hooks here a number of years ago, we were in the business of selling hooks. The minimum order from the factory that we went to, and we went straight to the factory, was 100,000 hooks. Well, that was no big problem, except I had to buy hooks all across their range of product, just the way they operated. And of course, the price was very reasonable. So consequently, I ended up with a bunch of 2X long and 4X long hooks that I don't have a heck of a lot of use for. So if there's anybody out there that needs 2 and 4X long, when I get back on screen, you can see my my email address on screen. Write it down, contact me, and we'll sure work you a good deal. Let's see. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back temporarily here. And in this mess, I've got 2 hackles. So there's big old hackles off of a saltwater cape. And I'll just take those over to the vise. And this time I'm going to switch back to the vise instead of getting carried away. And this is just kind of a repeat of last week's tip, except that we're going to then on the next fly, or the next hook, I should say, it's not even really a fly, give you an idea. Now what tonight is this is spring. It's time to start germinating seeds to grow your garden. And right now I'm throwing some seeds on the fly tying garden, hoping that all of you out there will see some of it and get an idea and decide to do something, whatever it might be, that we can add to the mix and maybe even put online next year or next fall when we go back to tying in the fall. And we're going to continue this until probably the 1st of May, and then we'll look at whether we're going to continue anymore or not. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this hackle and wrap it at the front and start working my way back, placing each turn behind the previous turn. And I have to work my way around this, the lens on this camera. There we go. I can get by it without having to worry about it. All right, I'll just wrap that a couple more times. And you notice it just kind of goes everywhere. And you say, well, Jesus, how are you going to make anything out of that? Well, I'm going to find out here in just a minute. Because this is called the Cheapy Nymph, and we're going to talk about it for a minute before I finish it. It was developed by a fellow by the name of Ed Wolf in Spokane, Washington in the early 70s. He was a fly shop owner. And like a lot of people at that time, he tried to make use of all of the materials he had. And at that time, we were tying most of our flies out of Cape. And there's a lot of big feathers on the Cape that tended to, well, you didn't have a lot of use for them. Ed came up with a use for them, and it became a really popular pattern in the Spokane country, the North Idaho country. And I'm just going to pull all that back. That ain't working. So when it ain't working, do it over. I'll just get another feather out. Okay, good. Now, what it was supposed to turn out like is this guy from last week, where we just wrap the hackle around and sweep it back. Well, I'm going to do the same thing now, but there's step number 2 that you can do with all of that. And we'll just tie on our hackle. All right, now I'll just start wrapping towards the back. Stop right about there. Grab the feather with my hackle pliers. And this will be the cheapy with a tail. I'm calling it a cheapy with a tail, but you can figure out what this old curmudgeon called it, cheapy with a piece of you know what. Anyway. All right, now we're going to get right back and meet our thread. And it's time now to tie this off. And at the same time, bind the feather to the top of the hook. Now I'll break off the tip, and what's remaining is my tail. Now, for anybody out there tonight, here's my problem. The thread is hanging down, and as I start to wrap, thread torque twists all those fibers around and leaves gaps. Look at that. I tell you, it leaves gaps. It's the first time in about 100 of these darn things that it didn't leave any gaps. Well, anyway, you kind of get the idea. There's got to be a way to do this. There's kind of some gap right there. But anyway, you get the idea. You've got a fly there tied out of hackle, which is a bunch of junky hackle that you really don't have a lot of use for. And if anybody is familiar with Keith Fulcher's Thunder Creek series of streamers, guess what this looks exactly like, except it's not done with bucktail. It's done with hackle. Broke my thread. I'll switch to another. Now I want to leave space up here to wrap hackle and so forth. And here's the wild thought I had, and maybe somebody else will come up with something different. But I am going to use a piece of bucktail. And in this mess over here, there is some bucktail somewhere. Oh yeah, there it is. I'm going to just use a piece of this white bucktail right back here. And here's what my plan is. If I have bulk on top of the hook and I don't on the bottom of the hook, let's take a look at this streamer. Is there a possibility that the fibers going across the top will flare out more because of the bulk on top of the shank, and the ones on the underneath side will be more like a throat? I don't know if that's possible. That's one of the thoughts that I had this afternoon, and that's what we're going to try right now. Now, this could be a body back here, whatever. We're not going to worry about that. We're just tying on the wing, and I want to make sure that this does not go down around the hook, so I am going to take a loop around the bundle. There we go. And that should hold it right up on top. And that doesn't look like enough bulk to do any good to me. So I'm going to get another small bundle. And I may be getting too much bulk here, but again, this is all new territory for me. So I have no idea whether how much is needed or not needed. All right. But I do know that I think that they need to be right up there on top. So now let's get a hackle. Alrighty. Now, what I'm pretty sure that I need to do is I need to make my hackle application in about this area. I need to leave a space in there so that the thread has the space to work with the fibers to bend them up, I think. And if that doesn't work, then that'll be a failed attempt at something, and we'll go from there. I'm going to have to put that hackle pliers on in a little bit. I just can't wrap this with a camera, at least right at the moment. Now I can put those hackle pliers on. Sure, I'm curious what I did to keep that hackle from splitting, going around the hook. I wonder if I maybe did some soft wraps and then kind of tighten them up. Maybe that's what I did. Maybe that's the answer to the whole thing. All right, so now I want to move my thread back, I think right there in that bare spot behind the hackle and in front of the bucktail. Make sure that bucktail is up on top. And we're going to just find out what happens here now. See if I can use that to fold it back a little bit better. Well, now let's look at here down on the bottom. The fibers are sticking pretty close in, and up on top, they seem to be fanning out a bit. Now, there's got to be some kind of a system that goes with that, but that'll give that fly some. I've got something crazy going on here, so I'm going to tie this one off. All my thread just slipped on the spool, like it came apart or something. Anyway, so I'll trim out all this excess here, tie it off, and get another thing of thread out. But I'm going to have to play with that a little bit, folks, and see. But it looks to me like it makes it flare up a little bit on top there. And you know, something else you could do, and I'm not set up to do it tonight, but you could tie on a bundle of hair of some kind or colored fibers of some sort before you wrap the hackle, and then pull them all over. You'd have a dark strip laying then over the top. And that's maybe peacock or something like that. I don't know what it would be, but that's another thought. Well, there's a wild looking mess if I ever saw one. And I can tell you that I've caught a ton of fish on it, but the truth of the matter is, if you believe that, then I caught the person that was most important. All right, now let's go over here to the materials and see what I can find. What do we got here? Okay, well, that's the last fly stuff. I'll set that over there right now and just leave it there. Oh, here's some marabou. Let's give some marabou a try and see what that does. Just like I did on that cheapie with a little tail that we saw just a minute ago, by just pulling some of the waste from wrapping the, I don't know what you call it, wing hackle combination, whatever. And but that part that I just threw away, I probably could have made use of that too. All right. Well, I think I'll tie that off now on top of the hook. Take off my hackle pliers and start wrapping to the back of the hook, just binding that feather to the shank. And then I'll wrap back to my wrapped hackle. Anyway, we're just doing some test drives here, so let's see what happens when I push all this back. It's a hot mess. And let me just kind of stroke some of this out. You know what? I'll bet you that thing would work through the water on a sink tip in a lake type of environment. Still water environment is a leech awful darn good, you know what? Okay, so what do we have here? Well, no reason why it shouldn't work. Well, I'm going to take the same concept now. And chickaboo is something else that I've got a lot of. When I left Whiting Farms to move back to Boise and care for Gretchen's parents, had a long chat with Tom, and he had a whole bunch of different feathers that was slated to go to the different fly factories. But one of the things that happened in the early 2000s was a thing called 9/11, and the whole doggone world stopped for a while. And that included the fly factories and the product that they turned out. And so Tom had a whole bunch of stuff that he normally sold to the fly factories offshore that he couldn't get rid of. So anyway, I bought a whole bunch of stuff. I won't tell you how much, but I bought a whole bunch of stuff by the pound. And that includes dry fly hackle and some of this kind of stuff. You've seen me talk about soft hackle and chickaboo. Well, I've sold these for 20 years now, and I still must have 50 of them left. But anyway, so we're going to try some of this chickaboo right here to do the same thing, only I think it's probably going to produce obviously a much smaller fly. Well, let's take a close up look at one of these feathers. It's really kind of interesting. I don't know exactly what we're going to do with that, but look, what we've got here is this really fuzzy stuff. And I think the stem will still bend right down into there. Okay, good. So we're basically going to have a mix of a couple of different things here, it looks like. Let's see I'll just take and strip some of this out.
Al, that after feather that you had in there, that makes really nice gills for a calaveras.
Oh, I know. As I say, I did not sell all of the ones that I got rid of. I use a lot of this. And by the way, I think you've heard me talk in the past about a substitute for CDC being the chickaboo hosed down with Kiwi Camp Dry or Scotch Guard. makes a really great substitute for CDC if you're going to use it in bundles, like for wings and stuff like that. If you're wanting the long fibery stuff for legs sticking out from the body, I haven't tested that. All I can tell you is that that right there makes one heck of a nice wing. And if it's all treated with Scotch Guard or Kiwi Camp Dry, it floats like crazy. And can you tell it from CDC? Well, you're going to have to do some pretty good looking to tell it from CDC. So let's see what happens here now. As I said, this is something I've never done before, but I should be able to get a Hackle pliers on that. It's short enough I won't keep running into the camera. So I'm going to do that. It's a little easier to wrap it with the Hackle pliers. My fingers are just a little too stiff as I get older to make that happen. That's interesting. Now I've got a hook that's way too long for the job at hand here, but I'm just going to wrap back part way, binding that tail / body to an imaginary hook. Well, here's what I kind of like. You see, if by giving that a twist as I'm wrapping it, notice how that thing stands up in kind of a tail-like configuration. That might be kind of interesting too. Anyway, so I'll wrap back a little further, making sure I keep that tail, if you will, standing up kind of like a fish's tail. All right. Let's see what this does for me. I'm thinking I like this the best of all I've done so far. I'm glad I didn't sell all that soft hackle with Chickaboo. I think I've got a use for some of it. I can think of a couple of little streams in right here north of Boise that I think the fish there will just love that a lot. Let's take a look at that guy. Well, I don't know if that looks buggy to you or not, but it kind of looks buggy to me. So I'm the one that has to be pleased with it right now. And maybe you guys are getting some ideas about all this. Now I've got one other option that I want to try, and I'm just going to set that one aside. I've done the Chickaboo part. I haven't done the soft tackle part. So we're going to give that a test drive, see what that does. All right, now I'll just get a piece of this Chickaboo. And you notice that the Chickaboo right here in the center, which would be along the breastbone, is a lot smaller feather. You know, actually it's some pretty good wet fly stuff. But out here towards the sides, we've got a lot bigger feathers. There's almost all black. Let me get one that's kind of a mix of colors, but I think it's got some pretty good length on the fibers. We'll see here anyway. All right, there we go. I wonder if that would make a tail. I think maybe I better find out. May as well not throw this stuff away. I'll strip some of that off. Tie it on. Maybe a little bit more. Got some right here. Be a bit of a mistake, we'll never know. But now let's wrap this soft tackle and see what that does. Well, that's looking kind of interesting. I think I'll put a topping on that tail. All right, well, let's push all those fibers back and see what that does. Well, I think I'm liking that one the best of all. Dingler looks like a muddler. Well, that's amazing. I know that I'm glad that I saved that chickaboo and soft tackle now. And now we're going to pretend here for a moment. In fact, I'm just going to go right about here. And this olive thread that I'm putting on is going to be a body. It could be anything, dubbing, tinsel. I mean, you make it, you'll see what it's, how it all comes together here in just a bit. And I've got some Hackle here that I left over from an order of streamers that I tied. And it's already, they've already been folded for a wet fly collar application. And so I'm just going to grab one of these, tie it on just like I was going to wrap a wet style collar. Okay, there we go. All right, and I'm just going to wrap a wet style collar here in front, sweeping my fibers back as I go. Now, I have to admit that this is not my idea. And I know everybody is familiar with this fellow, and Fred Dupre actually featured him on International Tires thing for the Fly Fishers International. Name is Davey McPhail. And what we're doing here is we're taking this collar now and pulling it up into a dry fly Trude style wing. Okay, Trude style caddis or whatever. And of course, remember the hook is way oversized. And now let's dig out our dry fly Hackle. And I'll just tie these on the hook like that. And I have to admit also that this is the first time that I've done this one. I happened to be checking out Davey's channel after watching him with Fred the other night. And I said, and that was something that he had come up with. And I said, boy, that is a really, really cool idea. And at the time he was using some, that Spanish bird. I can't think of the name now for some reason. Anyway, it's not coq de leon. Is it coq de leon? Okay, I was getting it mixed up with CDC. Okay, well, anyway, the coq de leon. Thank you, Fred. I'm going to wrap my first tackle, just like I would do for any dry fly. Tie off that first feather, couple of turns, and then wrap my thread in front of that, waiting for the second hackle to be wrapped. And I think this is a very doable option, especially for some of that big hackle on the dry fly capes that you have and you don't quite know what to do with it, I can see some 14 through 18 size dry fly, let's say stonefly caddis type imitations with those longer fibers that you don't have any use for. And there you go, a Trude style dry tied with, well, some big old, what I would call it, streamer hackle. And there's the one that's wet. I like this one the most of all. And it was just done with well, you saw what I did is I took a chickaboo or a soft hackle feather and took the fuzz off of it for the tail and made the rest of it into a head and a collar.
I thought it would have,
huh?
I thought it would have shrunk more than that into almost a tiny minnow looking thing, but it didn't.
It could very well have more. Understand it. I'd probably drip some off. And what I really found interesting is that this almost shed the water to start out. And it could be that it needs to get cleaned off, or maybe it's, I don't know.
Would
Could
it
be
give
that I
it some buoyancy? Meaning it'd go tail for up?
I don't know.
Might.
Anyway, so much for that. I'm going to talk to you about UV. This has been bugging me a little bit too. I just bought, well, one of these. A Solar-Res bone dry plus head cement. And it's got this little applicator that you can see in the top. And that was the better part of 25 bucks. I said, wow, that's a spendy little fellow. At the same time, I already had one of these, but I went looking and that was darn near 25 bucks. So you're looking at these two things right here, basically 50 bucks. It was another $30 for these colored ones because I want to try to do some eyes downstream. And again, I was thinking about all this. Doggone, that's spendy. Let me show you what I think might be an option. Let's see, I'll set that over there because we're going to need it. Now, you ladies will probably recognize this. You guys may not have a clue what I've got here. It's one of these things. Well, I don't see any guys nodding their head, but I would suspect some of the ladies have an idea what it is. So let me pull the cord out.
It's for nails when you put
Fingernail,
when they do their nails,
UV light.
you put your nails in it.
Yeah,
It dries your fingernails.
That's exactly right, Robin. You guys in Australia, where you don't have fly shops very much, you probably have already done this. But anyway, I can get one of these electrical contraptions, and I got 4 or 5 bottles of UV fingernail polish, different kinds. So I've got these two, and rather than drop them all over the place, I've got 4 more down there, and I've got the UV light, and all of that's for 25 bucks on Amazon. So I'm saying to myself, my God, is there some options that I can play with this summer and work out some of this stuff? Well, in fact, I think we ought to try one tonight. I almost never allow any kind of glue to get near my camera, but I think tonight we'll make an exception. Let me go back to there, and let me just find one of
Gretchen
these.
won't steal that from you?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you sure Gretchen won't steal that from you?
She probably will, and that's all right. I'll just go buy another one. Let's see here. Okay, here's a little cheapy nymph, and I'm just gonna see what I can do to the head on that. Let me turn that on, so then I'll set it down, and let me find one of these over here. What color? That's a base coat. There's some of these things I don't quite understand what they are, and that's why I need your help. That's a bonder. That one is everything red. That sounds good. Let's do everything red. So I am going to open this up. Yep, it's got a brush inside. And let me get over here to the vise. And I'm just putting this stuff on. Okay, and here comes the UV. It seems to be sort of setting it up, but it's not quite the same. Not quite the same. Well, we're finding out.
Al, I think I know what it is. It's various UV glues require different wavelengths of blue light or UV light
Yep.
in order to cure it. And so not every UV light will cure every UV glue.
Well, that's
You
what I'm
have
seeing.
to match it.
Well, that's what I'm seeing here. And also it was sort of soft a little bit there. And so I added it for a lot, about 3 times as long as I normally would with regular UV. And it seems to be setting up. I wonder if you could kind of set it on the hook a little bit and then put it in one of these things to finish cooking. I don't know. I'm going to find out. I'm going to play with that this summer and see, because I got it as an example. On Amazon, I was looking for this stuff that cost me as much as it did. And the next page, I was on page number 2, and that was on page 1. Page number 2, it had Solares surfboard finisher. Surfboard finisher.
Ow.
Well, geez, a surfboard is just as tough as a fly is. My God. So I said to myself, hey, yeah, and it was at $38 for a gallon. Hey, that's a gallon, guys. Not $38 for one of these. Rest assured, I'm going to be doing some testing this summer. Now, we're not done for the season, obviously, but I had this little chance with Gretchen gone to just kind of go crazy with some things. And I hope we've planted a few seeds in your thought garden that you might play with this summer.